Good afternoon. So, our next speaker, and in fact, he's the only Dutch stand-up keynote speaker that we have, Arjen van Berkum. And so he was sufficiently announced in the morning by Ewout, and his former title was the Chief Disruption Officer, and now he is the COO, which is less sexy, but he explained to me, why is that? That's because in the company where he's employed now, everyone is a Chief Disruption Officer. Arjen just got back from the Gartner event in Barcelona, where he did a keynote, I think, and where he spoke to 6,000 CIOs and executives. But nevertheless, he's very happy to be here because he knows that 350 developers have more impact than 6,000 executives.
Thanks. Welcome. Arjen van Berkum, Chief Disruption Officer once, currently Chief Operations Officer, but I'm also a teacher. And I teach in Delft, in Berlin, and in Mumbai on the topic of disruption, change, leadership. And one of the areas I really focus on is actually what happens in the healthcare industry. But before I go in there, I want to start with a collective leadership failure. Ladies and gentlemen, the most important day of the week. Thank God it's Friday. What does it mean? It means that we actually don't like what we're doing. Because we don't like Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. And that tells us something, actually, why it's so extremely important to talk about how do we make work much more fun. Because if we make work fun again, we'll get a whole lot further. And ladies and gentlemen, the company I now work for, and then of course technology does what technology needs to do, is called Another Monday. And we're in the business of making work fun again. Change the way the world works. How do we do that? We automate the mundane, we automate the boring, we automate the irrelevant. And in the 15 minutes I have with you today, I will be sharing some thoughts on how I think that in the medical industry, let's call it like that, change needs to happen, and some things that are currently happening that are fundamental and maybe for people that are developers, not always the most coolest stuff. I'm going to talk about things like no-code. I'm going to talk about things like combining stuff when you don't even have a partnership. But it's important to realize that we're at a pivotal point in how ecosystems work. And we all know that if you look at the business you guys are in, it's about an ecosystem. Nobody is on its own. Everybody has some piece of the puzzle. Everybody has a bit of the data. Then there is all these individuals that have their own privacy rights and everything they want to do. So it's about something else. And again. So, let me start with some background. We are living in uncertain times. We all know that. But the funny thing is, everybody has always lived in uncertain times. Because nobody ever knew what the future was about. Because if you're in the now and you look towards the future, you have no idea what the future is going to be. However, our biggest problem right now is that in all the millennia of our evolution, the number of potential futures was not that big. Right now, with all the technology going around, with the way things evolve, the sheer amount of possibilities is huge. We scientists call this the uncertainty cone. The further you look out into the future, the less predictable the future becomes. And we'll do this on a linear timing. I'm a theoretical mathematician. We could talk quantum here, but let's do it on a linear timeline. Why is this important? Because when people don't understand where the world is going to, don't understand the technology, the most common reaction to technology is in effect fear. People fear what's happening. If you talk to the average doctor, who's usually a technology adept that they actually understand that's a Control-Alt-Delete and then usually stops, they're fearful of technology. Technology is therefore something you need to explain and need to make simple, and that's why it's so vital to involve all kinds of users of technology, all kinds of stakeholder groups. But the funny thing is, if you go backwards in time, the further you go back in time, also the less certain your information becomes. Because let's be honest, we might know what happened yesterday at 12:01. We'll definitely don't know what happened 5,000 years before Christ on the 21st of December on 12.01. It's again uncertain. And why is then there AI in the middle? Ladies and gentlemen, AI in this case is not about artificial intelligence. It's about augmented intelligence. What does it mean? Augmented intelligence is about the interface between how people and the machine operate together to create the fastest learning experience. We all know that machine learning and deep learning and blah, 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 the more data you have, the logical it is, the more correlations you can find. That's something people that understand the laws of big data get. But now think on all those people that don't understand the laws of big data. They think, yeah, but if you don't have all this information, there's still somebody that needs to make the split-second decision without having this information. And how can you bridge that gap between the intelligence coming from a lot of information and the intelligence coming from a lot of knowledge? Knowledge usually is more in the human domain. And it has to do with three very important elements, because of these three elements you probably will not be able to automate soon. And those are creativity, empathy, and entrepreneurship. Almost everything else, ladies and gentlemen, we will automate in the near future. Which means that if you want to talk about human lives, if you talk about health, if you talk about information, always be aware that you need to find it somewhere in this place. Let me say something bold. I don't believe in standardization. Not anymore. The current state of technology, if it's on a screen, if it's information out there, I can have it be captured by a robot and can bring it to any kind of information standard I want. I usually say, if you can get it somewhere on a Citrix screen, I really don't need to go into any application and any information because I can capture the data. So that means that this ecosystem thinking, where we had until 5 to 10 years ago parties that thought, I'm not going to open up, and you're not going to get it. In effect, if it's on a screen, you can capture it. Which means that the next step in standardization is next to having all those funny stuff like APIs and applications and open source, etc. That you now have the ability to actually everybody that doesn't want to play, to force them to play because you automate it. Let me give you an example. An average airport has 21 control rooms. One for customs, one for the fire department, yada, yada, yada. They all have their proprietary systems. If you're lucky, they're like these green screens with green numbers on it. And it's very hard for an airport to build a single control room. With automation, screen capturing stuff, etc., it's possible to build for an airport these 21 different systems into one real-time dashboard in 48 hours. To build it and then to run it, real-time. If you look, for instance, in healthcare, a really nice example is if you look at where is actually a lot of loss in healthcare value chains. There's a quite typical example is the emergency department and an especially critical care where nurses are running around and they need to have approval to do certain stuff from a doctor. And then the doctor is usually working 3 beds away on somebody else because usually it doesn't add up. However, if I know the patient, if I have an IoT device in the bed, I've made the syringe or any kind of medical material an IoT device as well. And actually there are beds right now that measure over 30 vital statistics at the same time. You are probably aware of it. Actually, a machine, and especially machine learning, is much better in validating should this patient now get this shot or not. Now there's 2 ways how you can sell this business case. The one business case is, yes, it's much more efficient. And guess what will happen? Every ER nurse, every ER doctor will rebel against it. But if you say to them, you can actually treat your patients better and faster because you get a real-time approval to administer this medication, it's a totally different business case. And this is what I see currently happening. The standard of exchanging medical data is right now in a way that we're using it for classical business cases. And the classical business case is always about cost. And the funny thing is, cost is not sexy. What it's really about is actually making people do what they want to do. If you look at the healthcare industry, especially in hospitals, nursing homes, etc., people that work there because they have a certain feeling for human beings. And this feeling for human beings is being translated in why they love to work there. It's also translated why usually nurses are paid abysmally, horribly bad. Because most of the time, hospital management realizes that these people want to do the job. That's a kind of funny thing. And you know, thank God it's Friday. It's actually leadership that's the biggest issue you will be facing. Because the average age of hospital managers, care managers, owners of hospitals when it's privatized is actually usually above 50, and they're male and they're white. It's not a diverse industry. And especially the leadership in this industry is still thinking on old business models. Medication companies are thinking like old business models. Pharma is thinking in old business models. And if you talk about standardization, for me, you talk in old business models because you are committing to what always has been. If you really want to break it, then you should add next to standardization automation of those that are unwilling to play. Because that's the only way you will break all these big cartels, all these big groups out there that don't want to play because they want to protect an old-fashioned economic model. I started with thank God it's Friday. And I went on with this is another Monday. Come next Monday. Whenever you meet anybody in this domain that's unwilling to open up, unwilling to start sharing, unwilling to actually drive value for society, remember one thing. The tooling to beat those guys is actually out there. You can do this. You will understand that you will have a more powerful skill set than ever before, because it's not just about developing anymore, it's about making sure that you retrieve the information any way possible, make it available in a very transparent, open way, and make sure that actually we start driving a new healthcare world. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the disruption. The disruption is that technology will now enable us to force those that don't want to play to play. I wish you a lot of luck, lots of fun, and enjoy this day.
Thank you so much, Arjen. We always have time for one burning question. Who? Mikael. Go ahead.
So what you said, when I go to that ER department, there are the nurses and doctors. I would still think that if you propose that, okay, you can make these decisions faster because you don't need to go to the doctors might still be afraid that somebody else, some device is taking an important part of their job that they get paid for. So I'd try to put there something from your previous slide about, okay, this would be more human way of treating this patient or something like that, and then you might get even a more positive response.
Yes, I think you're very right. This is an actual existing use case. What we have learned is that actually the process doctors hate most is actually say to a nurse, yeah, you can give it. So the right emotion is not to tell to the doctor, the nurse will have more time. The right emotion is, and that's called stakeholder management, is to you tell to the doctor, you get more time to spend at the patients that really need you at their bedside. Because where the nurse is already losing 10, 15, sometimes 20% of their time waiting for the approval, actually the surgeon is not always taking care of patients because he or she needs to have a look at, can I give the approval? So automating the approval cycle in any medical process is a win-win for all stakeholders, unless, and here it comes again, if you do it as a cosplay because you want to treat more patients as an owner of a hospital. So my important lesson is, don't talk to managers, don't talk to owners of these businesses, talk to the people that really want to make the world better for their patients. That's the only answer I can give you.
Thank you very much again. Applause, people.
Thanks.
Thank you.